take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy?
I'm a human being, god damn it! My life has value! It's time to ask yourself what you believe.
Mass murder, torture, perjury, embezzlement, fraud, deception, treason. These are just a few of your many crimes against humanity. You will not win this war, for you are fighting the very essence of humanity.
Holy war to regain the temple and free themselves from the Seleucids would require strength, sacrifice, and endurance on the part of the Jews. To prevail, they would need leaders of uncommon ability. They had found one in Judah Maccabee.
He was courageous, stalwart, strong, unbending, unshakable, successful military leader, and he inspired a whole population probably that had never previously known war before, never had even trained in war, never thought they could fight. Where he came from, how he arose, what the precedents were, it's impossible to say.
After the initial skirmish at Modin, it is clear that the revolution had gained a commander with a rare combination of righteousness, ruthlessness, and brilliance in combat. Yet little is known about Judah Maccabee's early life. When and how did he become a master at the art of war? The mystery remains. In the wilderness, Judah's army began to grow. He organized daring raids to harass the outlying Seleucid garrisons. As the Seleucid body count mounted, the Jews began to view Judah as a hero sent from heaven, one who would deliver them from the hands of their oppressors. Is it possible that Judah's followers believed he might be a Messiah, divinely sent to do God's will?
He certainly was a really new type of Jew, a warrior Jew with a very strong spiritual bent, a holy warrior. Was he a Messiah for his time? I think the people certainly saw him as such.
As Judah's power soared in the countryside, an urgent call for help was sent to the Seleucid provincial governor, Apollonius. With an army of 3,000 well-armed troops, Apollonius marched upon Judah's ragtag recruits, less than one-third the size of the Seleucid army. But Apollonius had made a grave error in underestimating Judah's determined and desperate followers.
They had this idea clearly of holy war, and for them, numbers didn't matter, the size of the armies didn't matter. In fact, Judas says at one point, according to one of the sources, that he prefers a small army, a guerrilla-type army. The strength is in the commitment, and he says the victory comes from the Lord of heaven, comes from God.
As the Seleucid army marched through a narrow gorge, Judah's warriors descended upon them in ambush. The Seleucids lost over 1,000 men. Legends relate that Apollonius was killed by Judah himself. The first book of Maccabees recounts that Judah then took the sword of Apollonius as his own. The second book of Maccabees gives us a markedly different version, perhaps one of the most mysterious in the entire Bible. It is a story of the supernatural and the miraculous. In it, the battle sword is given to Judah by an angel, the prophet Jeremiah.
Jeremiah stretched out his hand and gave to Judah a golden sword and addressed him thus, "Take this holy sword, a gift from God, with which you will strike down your adversaries." 2 Maccabees 15:15.
This is a very mysterious episode. Out of nowhere, we get people coming back to life. We get heavenly horsemen, like in the apocalypse, suddenly appearing all dressed in gold on the battlefield and swinging the battle to the side of the holy warriors led by Judas.
We may never know whether the Seleucids were destroyed by brilliant tactics or heavenly messengers. But soon after this defeat, an army twice as large was sent against the recalcitrant Jews. Again it was vanquished by Judah's superior tactics. Again its general killed in battle. Antiochus finally realized his empire faced a serious rebellion. Enraged, he commanded his viceroy Lysias to destroy the Jews once and for all.
He turned over to Lysias half of his forces and the elephants to wipe out and destroy the strength of Israel and to banish the memory of them from the place. 1 Maccabees 3:32.
The Seleucids threw every piece of armor against the Maccabees they could, including elephants, into that region of the world where they'd never seen an elephant before. And it was supposed to invoke fear in the Maccabean fighters.
Bristling with an arsenal of modern weapons, an army of battle-hardened veterans now marched against the Maccabees. The Bible puts their number at 47,000.
One of the things that one has to remember is that though our sources, of course, are going to embellish this David-Goliath story for all it's worth, in some of these battles, the odds were not all that great against the Jews, and in fact the Jews might even have had superior manpower in some of these battles.
Whatever the true size of the armies involved, Judah again demonstrated himself a master strategist. Learning that part of the Seleucid army had left its base, planning to fall upon him during the night, Judah surreptitiously abandoned his own military quarters in the hills, ordering his campfires to be left burning to confuse the approaching enemy. Judah then fell upon the remaining Seleucids in the plain below. After their fruitless attempt to surprise Judah, the first Seleucid detachment returned at dawn. In horror, they watched Judah's army mercilessly cutting down their comrades.
They saw that their army had been put to flight and that the Jews were burning the camp. They were filled with panic as they also saw the army of Judah in the plain ready for battle, and they all fled. 1 Maccabees 4:20.
The Viceroy Lysias himself was now forced to deal personally with the Maccabees. In the spring of 164 BCE, with an enormous army said to number over 65,000, he marched upon Judea. Lysias was confident that this time the Seleucids would not fail. The Jews had to be vanquished. When we return, how could Judah's warriors prevail over the empire's most experienced soldiers? And what is the surprising connection between the Jewish festival of Hanukkah and the Christian concept of resurrection? Although the Jews had won many battles under the brilliant leadership of Judah, the struggle to defeat the Seleucids continued. Since the beginning of their battle for independence, thousands had been murdered in defense of their religion. Pious Jews asked themselves how God could let his people die at the hands of the pagans. From this question arose a concept that would resonate for centuries, the idea of resurrection. Devout Jews believe their current tribulations signal the approach of the apocalypse, the final days of earth. They had faith that God would help them defeat the Seleucids and then miraculously bring back to eternal life those who had been martyred in their cause of freedom.
You dismiss us from this present life, but the King of the universe will raise us up to an everlasting renewal of life, because we have died for his laws. 2 Maccabees 7:9.
The very terror that was leveled upon the Jews in the time of Antiochus IV and the persecutions prompted this sort of reflection. What's going on before their very eyes was so unthinkable, so unspeakable to people who were otherwise innocent and righteous, that the only way to justify it, to rationalize it, to explain it to oneself is that in the long run there's going to be a resurrection.
The emperor's viceroy Lysias was not concerned whether Jewish martyrs would enjoy everlasting life. He was determined only that more Jews die. Humiliated by the recent defeat of his most experienced generals at the hands of the Maccabees, he assembled an army of 65,000 and marched into Judea, where the Maccabean rebels awaited them. As the enemy approached Jerusalem, Judah realized the Seleucids would have to break battle formation to traverse a narrow gully. Seizing this opportunity, in a daring attack, Judah isolated and crushed the enemy vanguard. Then, as thousands of arrows rained down, the Maccabees attacked the main body of the Seleucids. Confronted by the implacable warriors of Judah, the Seleucids retreated in confusion and panic. They died by the thousands. Lysias, seeing his huge army disintegrating around him and unable to stage a counterattack, withdrew. He had lost over 5,000 men in only a few hours. With the defeat of Lysias, Judah now controlled all Judea. After 4 years of bloody war, his triumphant forces entered the holy city of Jerusalem. But what they found on the Temple Mount would horrify them. The house of God had been defiled by an altar dedicated to foreign gods.
There they saw the sanctuary desolate, the altar profaned. They saw the chambers of the priests in ruins. Then they tore their clothes and mourned with great lamentation. 1 Maccabees 4:38.
When they came in and they saw these upright stones or whatever they were on the altar, they saw another altar of sacrifice, they were horrified, and they viewed the temple as polluted, as unholy, as impure.
The victorious Jews beheld the devastation of their holy temple, its sacred altar covered with the dried blood of unclean animals. In order to purify the house of God, they scrubbed the temple clean. Then they removed the idols and sacrilegious stones which had been placed on top of the original altar.
We know that the pagan altar was removed. Even the Jewish altar, which had now been profaned by having a pagan one put on top of it, was removed stone by stone and a new one built.
For weeks, the Maccabees puzzled over what to do with the sacred stones from the original altar, which had been desecrated in blasphemous sacrifice by the pagans.
They deliberated what to do about the altar of burnt offering, which had been profaned. They thought it best to tear it down, so they tore down the altar and stored the stones on the temple hill until a prophet should come to tell them what to do with them. 1 Maccabees 4:44.
The books of Maccabee only reveal that the sacred stones were stored somewhere on the temple hill. For centuries, scholars have wondered about their fate.
What happened to the original stones? They seem to have been thrown down by the Greeks or affected in some way, because the Maccabee books tell us that the temple was in ruins, that the buildings had been burned, that there were weeds growing up, that the altar had been desecrated. So there is a mystery there. What did they do with these stones? Where did they put them?
For over 2,000 years, the consecrated stones which made up the original altar have lain hidden and undisturbed. To this day, their whereabouts remain a mystery. Under the supervision of the priests, a new altar was carefully constructed based on the design of the original one. It was a time of exaltation for the faithful.
Because the Holy Temple was such a central place of worship and so revered for its holiness by the Jewish people, the ability to restore it and rededicate it after it had been violated had to represent a tremendous spiritual catharsis for the people.
The consecration of their Holy Temple was almost complete. The religious convictions so many had fought and died for had miraculously survived. Here, at the holiest site of all, the Jews would once again worship the God of their fathers. And a miracle was about to occur.
Mysteries of the Bible will be right back.
Against all odds, Judah and his army had successfully recovered the Holy Temple of Jerusalem. Its triumphant rededication would be the crowning glory of the Maccabean struggle.
Then Judah and his brothers and the entire congregation of Israel decreed that the days of the dedication of the altar should be observed with joy and gladness for 8 days at the same season each year. 1 Maccabees 4:59.
Judah ordained that the dedication of the temple should be observed each year as a joyous holiday. The festival of Hanukkah was born.
Hello, thanks for having me on your radio. Even though we're not from a famous rock and roll band, if we were, even though we sound a little like we are, we definitely wear a Conspiracy Realist t-shirt, because they're gear, aren't they? Oh yeah, they're really gear. I want to write a song about them. Conspiracy Realist t-shirts at truthatees.com. I gotta think of the middle eight. Shop.truthatees.com. What does that mean? It's the internet. What's that? I don't know. It's a net. It's between things. Shop.truthatees.com. What's that? It's where you get Conspiracy Realist t-shirts. Oh, gear.
We're going to touch on right now, we're going to touch on Maccabees. All right? And we're going to take it to the whiteboard on Maccabees, as we had said that we would. Let's take this down right here on Maccabees. Why is Rastafari and Maccabees? What is this cryptic link? Right? And we've been looking at what folks have been saying, and some folks have some things right, but there still seems to be something missing on what's being mentioned about Maccabees. And we're taking this time and opportunity, right, in the Hanukkah, first of all, to reclaim Hanukkah as our real, quote, Kwanzaa, right? I mean, Kwanzaa, forget about it. Learn about Hanukkah, right? First of all, learn about who you truly are. You know what I'm saying? If you can receive it, so be it. So we're going to touch on the original Maccabees, right? What is so important about Maccabees? And folks have been talking about the Maccabee Bible, right? Let's just say this at the beginning, and then we'll demonstrate as we go forward. The real Maccabee Bible is the Metzhaf Kedus, is the Ethiopian Bible, is the Bible of His Majesty. This is the real Maccabee Bible, right? This is the real Maccabee Bible, if you understand the whole root and the truth of Maccabees. Now, if you turn in your Bible, right, if you turn in the scriptures to, who is it? It is Jeremiah, right? Jeremiah, there's a very interesting verse in Jeremiah. Let's get our Metzhaf, where's our Metzhaf Kedus? Is our Metzhaf Kedus over there? The Englishania. If you see the English Metzhaf Kedus, Gedainai scripture. Okay. Miss Ghana. All right, so let's go to Jeremiah for a moment, right? And we're going to make this Maccabee connection. First of all, what does Maccabee mean? Never deal with any word or concept or idea from the scripture and say that you're heavy and you bother not to investigate, right, the true roots and origins, right, the true roots and origins, especially concerning the scripture. It's the key. It can avoid a lot of mistranslation of false concepts, of other kind of ideas that are totally irrelevant, right? That are totally irrelevant. So right here, where are we at right here? So we have Jeremiah, all right? Jeremiah, let's get this over here. Jeremiah. So let's turn the scriptures to the book of Jeremiah. Maccah. What does Maccabee mean? Right? Let's put this up here while we wait for that right there. Rastafari. Rastafari and Maccabees. We'll say Maccabees. Rastafari, Maccabees. Right? Rastafari, Maccabees. Okay. So what does, first things first, let us define terms. All right? Let us define terms. We need to define certain terms right here. We need to define, what does Maccabee mean? Maccabee, right? Maccabee means hammer. Now Maccabee, the story of Maccabee relates to Judas Maccabeus, right? Judas Maccabeus, right? It relates to a particular period of time in our story or in our history of our ancestors. It's a period of time that's between the book of Malachi and the book of Matthew. Interesting. I don't know if it means something, 3 M's, but we have the book of Malachi, right? Malachi, right? And then we have the book of Matthew, right? Some say that Matthew never existed. Some say that Matthew was Marcion. Unfortunately, even though some of the ones who say it have presented much valuable information and a lot of knowledge elsewhere, but on that point that Matthew is Marcion, that's a lie right there. That's a lie right there. Because they see they're borrowing actually from the same folks who are suppressing them, and they're not able to go to original source. Right, original source. We're speaking about getting to our Afro-Shemitic, getting into the Hebrew, and even going to the root in the Ethiopic and the Royal Amharic to really get to the core. Even the so-called Jews who call themselves Jews, they had to go to the Ethiopic and study the Ethiopic in order to re-speak the Yidbru or the Yiddish of today. You know what I'm saying? Or the Hebrew that they're speaking. They say they've resurrected it, but it's a form of Hebrew. Or it's a deformity of the Hebrew, but it's still a, quote, form of the Hebrew. They were only able to get that biblical Hebrew, and we can actually go through the document and evidence. Studying linguistics, we see that a lot of the ones who were reconstructing the Hebrew had to turn to the Ethiopic, right? Because it's a living language that they like to call a dead language. They like to do that a lot. You know what I'm saying? They like to call things what it's not, because that right there is a key control, right? Control factor. So between Malachi, the last book in the Old Testament, and Matthew, the first book in the New Testament, we have the book of Maccabees along with other pseudepigrapha, right? In other words, pseudo, falsely hidden. That's what they call falsely. Pseudo means false, so-called, right? Like gnosis, pseudonymos, science, falsely so-called. This is what we are afflicted by. This is what we're up against, so-called a scientific regime, falsely so-called. So there's some science to it, you know what I'm saying, but it's more like Franken-science, right? It's a bit of this, it's a bit of that, and it creates a monster. So we're up against a monster. all right? But be of good courage. The Moshiach is with I and I. And if Ha Elohim is for I and I, the word of truth, who can be against us? Let's touch on the word right now, Jeremiah 23. So let's go to Jeremiah chapter 23, right? Jeremiah chapter 23 and 29. Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 29, it says, "Is not my word like as a fire, saith Yahweh, saith he who be who he be?" A lot of folks will tell you that Yahweh or YHWH mean I am that I am. That's just a classic example that they don't even understand their proper pronouns or the proper sense of first person and third person. All right? In Hebrew, Yahweh means he who be who he be. Right? Ehyah means I am. Ehyah, Asher, Ehyah means I am that I am. That is what divinity spoke to Moses through the burning bush. Through the mystery of the burning bush, that is what was spoken to Moses. Now, when Moses spoke to the people, he could not say, I am that I am. Because they would say, Wishatam, you lie. But it said that he who is who he is, Yehovah's, because the Hebraic understood that, right? It is what it is. This is why we say today, it is what it is, right? He is who he is. It is, he is. We say it today because this is a part of the breaking and the foreign false language linguistics, but you can still feel that root, that seed, that essence, that spirit of the people even breaking through the concrete of the Western Gentile mentality when we say it is what it is. He is who he is. Amen. Amen. It be what it be. So be it. You understand? So be it. You understand? That's the idea of Amen. All right? That's that idea of Amen. So don't say you don't have faith. You understand? Instead, recognize how you misapply the faith, the living energy that you already have, to false and misunderstood ideas and concepts. You give your word. You give your spirit, a portion of your spirit, to yea and amen it. All right? And that means psychically you're connected with it, where it says, don't telling men Godspeed if they don't come with this teaching. We can't bid them shalom, because the shalom is that essence, right, of Moshiach within us. We cannot bid them shalom, you understand, because it's to be unequally yoked, because we become partakers on a metaphysical level of their evil deeds. This is very key. You understand? This is truly key. They don't teach you this in modern psychology, partly because they don't know it, and partly because they don't want you to know it. Is not my word like as a fire? So his word is likened to a fire. Remember that in Maccabees, do we get the Hanukkah? Do we get the miracle of the oil? Remember, the oil is symbolic of spirit. 1 day's worth of oil lit the menorah, right, for 8 days. So 1 day's supply lasted for 8 days. This is interesting. This is interesting when we think about this. 1 day's supply lasts for 8 days. It's almost like when you only have like a little bit of money, enough money that usually lasts for 1 day. And that money lasts for 8 days, and you're still able to do everything, eat and everything else on that little bit of money. That's a miracle. You understand? Hallelujah. Amen. But it's even deeper than that, right? It's even deeper than that. So let's put this right here, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So let's connect it. 1, 2, 3, 5, and right here, and we have the 8. Let's understand that. Now, modern Jews would say that Hanukkah, right, Hanukkah is a symbol of identity. Now, we have to remember this, that these modern Jews, right, some of them are Zionists, right, are like Revelation 2 and 9. Others are like some of the Torah Jews, like Revelation 3 and 9. There's a distinction there, right? One does not bow to the true black Messiah, the other does. Let's recognize that. That's a key distinction there, and it's because of the makaru, it's because of the divine light, the Shekinah or the Shekinah, the Shekinah. Anyway, so we have 1 day supply of oil lasting for 8 days. Now they create a new menorah, right? And we've been seeking to study this from the Word, and even some of the extra so-called biblical literature, right? And we have not been able to find the Hanukkah with the 9 branches, all right? But symbolically, let's allow it as a symbol because we understand the 9. We understand the significance of 9, so we have to look at this metaphysically. But symbolically, we're going to hold this right here, the menorah of the 7, keeping with the light of the Word. So he says, is not my word, right, my word like as a fire? So word which is like fire, what kind of word is this? Saith Yahweh. And like a hammer that breaketh the rock in pieces, right? And like a hammer, and like a Maccabee, right? Like a Maccabee, right? That breaketh the rock in pieces. That's interesting right there, that breaketh the rock in pieces. So Maccabee, right, means the hammer. Why the hammer? See, here's when we get into a very interesting part of our story that is as real today for I and I as it was then. But still the curious and the interesting question is, why did the Rastafari elders, you know what I'm saying, put so much emphasis on Maccabees, right? There's a song by Max Romeo that says, you gave I King James Version, right? King James was a white man. You built I dangerous weapon to kill I all the black man. You sold the land God gave I and taught I to be covetous. Covetous means having an insatiable desire to have that which you have no right to. It's almost like today a lot of people have a sense of entitlement, right? Even though they don't even carry the title of Mr. or Mrs. or even Ms. anymore. They have no title, but they have a sense of entitlement. That is what has been taught in how to make a slave, right, to the lost sheep, to teach them to be covetous. What other wicked deeds have you got in mind? Tell me, what are you going to do to stop these daily crimes? What are you going to do to stop these daily crimes? Then it goes to the chorus part. It says, bring back Maccabee version that God gave to black man. Give back King James Version that belongs to the white man. Black man, get up, stand up. Find your foot. Find your foot. Very interesting, because our prayer in this time is that we escape these things that are coming and be found worthy to stand before the Son of Man. It says, and give black God the glory. Black man, get up, stand up, find your foot, and give black God the glory. Then it goes on a little bit more. It says, you suffer I, and you rob I. In other words, you cause sufferation. So you starve I, then you kill I. Interesting, you suffer I, like stress ones, right? Suffer them, bring tribulation, rob them. When you rob them, you starve them. Once you starve them, you kill them. So we can see a cycle right there. But what are you going to do now that your sword have turned against you? In other words, that their sword has turned against themselves, right? Or white on white violence. What is that known as? Sounds like World War I, World War II, right? Sounds like independence in America and revolutions throughout. You know what I'm saying? But they don't teach you that. Anyway, black man, get up, stand up, find your foot, and give black God the glory. Black man, get up, stand up, find your foot, and give black God the glory. Bring back Maccabee version that God gave to black man. Give back King James version that belongs to the white man. Black man, get up, stand up, find your foot, and give black God the glory. Black man, get up, stand up, find your foot, and give black God the glory. Now that is from and by Max Romeo, and that tune is called the Maccabee version. Now it's interesting over here in this article I see right here, it says the most puzzling aspect of these lyrics is when the singer claims that God gave Maccabee version of the Bible to the black man in Jamaica. Hold up. Did you hear anywhere in Max Romeo's song where he said that God gave black man the Maccabee version in Jamaica? In Jamaica, it doesn't say that. See, we have to really, we have to really scrutinize these things, all right? And because words are very significant, words. Like Yeshua says, Yesu says, he says, take heed how you hear, how you shema, how you hear. You know what I'm saying? So that right there, we want to blow that out the water. Why does he sing this? One possibility is that the black slaves who knew about these two books of the Maccabees must have identified with their description of a rebellion against the Greek occupiers and oppressors of the Jews, of the black Jews, if you will, the Ethiopian Hebrews. Thus, when the white or the European Christian missionaries, the Gentiles, began to evil angelize or evangelize the black Jamaican slaves amongst other Jamaican slaves, the Benjamites, the Levites, and of course the Judites here in North America, and their descendants and relatives with Bibles and European doctrines of demons, right? Blonde hair, blue-eyed demons. That did not include the books of the Maccabees. This may have made them suspicious as to why this had been done. One source has the following explanation and goes into some details there. And that's very interesting. I've saved it. You should save it. Check it out. Just do a little search. We put Maccabee Bible and Rasta, and the first couple of searches that came up are kind of interesting to kind of read and kind of weigh and balance and do some further study of yourself. But in that passage, in that paragraph there, we got an important key and a link. And we need to follow that important key and the link, because it's speaking about the times of the Greeks, right? The Greeks occupiers and oppressors. And this is what the period that Maccabees speak about. But what is so significant, if you start to study the story, if you go to the Hanukkah Wikipedia page, those Jews, the other Jews, they basically touch on it a little bit, right? But then when you look at the real context, the fact that the Jews of that time were also considered to be Ethiopian in their race, like the Jews of this time that one see or receive as Jews are chiefly of the European, right, race, right, or the Germanic race, the popular Jews that we see and that everyone accepts without any sort of, most people accept without any sort of question. But when we put it into its proper context, we had two groups, right, during this middle period. So we have two kinds of a middle passage, right? We have a middle passage in the 15, the 16, and the 1700s, right? The Ethiopic, trans-Ethiopic ocean slave trade, falsely called the transatlantic slave trade, right? But then during this period, roughly 200 BCE, and counting down to the Common Era, we also had this middle passage. Now, we pointed this out before in the First Schofield Study Bible. If you go between the two chapters, right, and it's a very interesting read if you haven't read it, If you want to download it, you can go to lojsociety.org, and you can click on the Resource Center, and you'll find a free PDF and a lot of the free books and programs to study. It speaks of this portion right here. Let me bring it a little bit further. It says, number 3, it says, in BC 198, Judea was conquered by Antiochus the Great and annexed to Syria. At this time, the division of the land into the 5 provinces familiar to readers of the Gospel, Galilee, Samaria, Judea, often collectively called Judea, Trachonitis, and Perea, was made. The Jews, or the black Hebrews, at first were permitted to live under their own laws, under the high priest and a council. About BC 180, the land became the dowry of Cleopatra. Wow. You see how Cleopatra comes in our Rastafari Maccabee story right there? So when we're hearing and watching Cleopatra or looking at documentaries, do we ever even understand this real connection of our story, right, of our history? Because say history is prologue. If you don't understand history, you're bound, they say, to repeat it. Or could we be repeating? Have we repeated history that we could have avoided if only we knew it? So you have to get past that that COINTELPRO, that countering intelligence, the Antichrist agenda against the Black Messiah, and get to the root of this. So about BC 180, the land became the dowry of Cleopatra, a Syrian princess married to Ptolemy of Philometor. You see, a lot of our so-called black Egyptologists and others have been telling us everyone is black just to, I'm not going to say make us feel good, but perhaps they're not doing due diligence. This is one reason why when people say, oh, Cleopatra, she was or Nefertiti, you don't even know Jezebel if you looked at her. Let's understand certain things right here, and that's the problem with what's going on even in the shit hop and in the whole Babylon society of today with the lost sheeple, right? So she was married to Ptolemy Philometor, king of Egypt, but on the death of Cleopatra, right, was reclaimed by Antiochus Epiphanes, the little horn, some say, of Daniel chapter 8 and 9. And there's a note for those who want to study it. After a bloody battle. In 170 BC, Antiochus, after repeated interferences with the temple and priesthood, plundered Jerusalem and profaned the temple and enslaved great numbers of inhabitants. All right? Enslaved great numbers of inhabitants. Now check this out. Here's the interesting thing. December 25th, BC 168. Almost reminds me of when we think about 1968 as a year. It's kind of interesting. And here we have 168. Any connection? Possibly. But let's go on. Antiochus, he offered a sow or a pig. He offered a pigger. He offered a pig. Of all of the filthy animals, he offered a pig upon the great altar of the temple, right? And erected an altar to Jupiter. To Jupiter. Let's understand this. This is the desolation, some say, which is spoken of in Daniel chapter 8, verse 13. It's a type of the final abomination of desolation. The final abomination of desolation that's spoken of, they say, in Matthew 24 and 15. But then you have to ask yourself, well, if that's so, Matthew 24 and 15, wasn't Yeshua telling us of things to come? Is he telling us that the things to come are going to be likened to the things that have passed? That's why we need to understand that past is prologue. Before we can get into the story, first let's read and study the prologue. The temple worship was verboten, was forbidden, and the people compelled. The people were forced to eat swine flesh. Now we can go into a whole study, and a lot of other folks have, on the pork, the pig, the black man, and everything. In fact, I just saw this book over here. Let's see if we can get this book over here. I see this book over here that I hadn't looked at, maybe a little dusty right here. Right? You see what it says? How not to eat pork. Right? You remember this campaign went on a couple of years ago, pork, the new white meat? It's almost like black folks are beginning to wake up. Right? A couple of years ago, a lot of us talk about how it was in the 90s. I mean, hey, you want to get an image of Antiochus Epiphanes? You understand? This is how much they love the pig. Right? Look at that crazy stuff right there. I mean, you could just go figure. Or better yet, don't go figure. You understand? Just know, like, yeah, it's true. I mean, this book right here just breaks it down. And when we talk about things like HIV and AIDS and things that break down your immunity, you understand? Having a worm. Look at that, a worm. Notice that if you turn on the side, it looks like that Illuminati stuff that they worship, that satanic, that worm stuff, right? That snake stuff, that fallen snake. You understand? Not a flying one, but a falling one, a fallen snake, right? But anyway, it breaks down a lot of the diseases, right? The resume of the pig, you know what I mean? The kind of diseases that it carries, so forth and so on. And you should already know, you understand, how not to eat. You understand how not to eat pork, right? I mean, just on a health level. I know there's a lot of folks that would say, oh, you can't eat pork because such and such. You have to remember that's part of their cult, right? That's a part of their cult, not a part of our culture. We have a culture, not a cult, even though there's a lot of slanders and liars out there, but that's going to be what that's going to be. Now, what is so interesting about this right here is that in the next part, it says that the excesses of Antiochus provoked the revolt of the Maccabees, one of the most heroic pages of history. But notice that this part of our story, the most heroic page of history, they took it out. In a sense, we could almost look at the Maccabees on a certain level as what occurred during the 60s and a portion of the 70s, the whole Black Power movement and the Black Liberation movement, a lot of these other movements on a level of, just to get a comparison, this is what it was like, right? Mattathias, the first of the Maccabees, a priest of great sanctity and energy of character, he began the revolt. He did little more than to gather a band of godly and determined Jews, and they were known as Hasids, like the Hasid, right? And the Hasidah is also that link to Hudi is also linked in that, if you understand. And they pledged to free the nation and restore the ancient worship, and was succeeded by his son, Judas, right? Or Yehuda, known in history as Maccabeus. So it's from him that we get this name Maccabee or Maccabeus, from the Hebrew word, and it tells you right here on page 985 of the First Schofield Study Bible. It's the Hebrew word for hammer. He was assisted by 4 brothers, of whom Simeon is the best known. Now, it's interesting as we study this right here, we'll see that in BC 165, Judas, he regained possession of Jerusalem. He purified and rededicated the temple, an event that is celebrated in the Jewish feast of dedication, or in the Yehuda, the Ihud feast that we know and that we celebrate and commemorate and remember in this time, known as Hanukkah, right? Or the Hanukkah, right? This is it, the feast of dedication, or as we would say, Rastafari, livication, right? A livication that has to do with the light, right? The oil, the fire, the light. Now let's understand that metaphysically. The struggle with Antiochus and his successor continued. Judas, Yehuda, was slain in battle, his brother Jonathan succeeding. In him, the civil and priestly authority were united. So here is where we see the civil to say the kingly authority is united now with the priestly, right? The priestly authority. This is very important, and this is roughly BC 143. Under Jonathan, his brother Simon and his nephew John Hyrcanus, the Hasmonean line of priest rulers was established. Now, in the Ethiopic liturgy, I think there's some liturgies that have a link also with one who's of the Hyrcanus. I remember seeing John Hyrcanus written in some of the Ethiopic documents. I have to find that and present that. Under sufferance of other powers, right, they possess none of the Maccabean virtues. So we have a kind of a high point, and then it's brought down to a low point and everything like that. Now, it goes on with the Civil War. It brings in the Caesars. But the good thing about this is that it gives you that middle part of the historical account. But at the heart of it, we find something that is very interesting, that there were two types of, for lack of a better word, Jews. And we'll compare it with two types of Negroes, right? Right? There was two types of Negroes. I don't know how to put this right here, but let's put it down here. There were two types of Negroes, right? There were what they called the Hellenistic, right? And these Hellenistic ones, we will call them today like the Boule, right? The Boule. Right? In other words, those are the ones who are willing to, though they might know certain intellectual things about how great Africa was, or some of the black history that we find, we were proud in, or they might be into Egypt or whatever like that, but basically they want to live in the image of the beast. These were the Jews that were willing to forsake their covenant. These were those who were willing to forsake their true name and covenant and to be like Greek. These are the ones who went Greek. So these Negroes right here, they went Greek. But then on the opposite side, right, and that's the Maccabean side, and this is where the whole essence, right, the whole essence of the original Maccabees is all about, this aspect of the story, right? The whole book of Maccabees is about this, that you had what some might call the religious Jews, or the faithful, right? The faithful Hebrews right here. We like to call them the remnant of Beta Israel, but we'll call them, according to the Ethiopic, we'll call them the Ihud, right? Or here's what we had, the black or the Hebrew Jews, right? The black or Hebrew Jews. I mean, we can prove that identity right there. So you had the faithful ones, those who wanted to keep to the covenant, those who wanted to keep Shabbat, those who wanted to keep the moral law and keep the covenant of God, right, on this side, and this is like the Maccabean side. And then you had those, in a sense, whom Malachi, in the prophet Malachi, he denounced these. He denounced these who would sell out their heritage and who would sell out their culture. Right? I mean, I'm not even just their culture, but sell out their inheritance. So we can almost see a kind of a Jacob, right? These are more be like Jacobites, and these would be like the Esau. Although they are from one family, although many of them were brothers. I mean, you had it where brothers fought against brothers. In other words, this divide was as clear, in a sense, then as it is now. And here's the good news, is that as we study, right, the details of this, right, and really get the true spirituality and the word of truth of this, we both have a historical kind of a template, an overview, right, that confirms many things that we know, as well as highlight other aspects that we don't know. So we can learn from even some of the mistakes, in other words, of the past. And I find this to be sharply also amongst, when we look at the Black Power movement, right, on a certain level, right, especially the so-called Back to Africa movement, right, or those who are about the Ethiopian Hebrew, the spiritual movement, right, and those over here who maybe intellectualize with some of their themes. In other words, if the Gentiles were curious about it, these ones would promote it to the Gentiles out of curiosity. But to live covenant, no, they did not live covenant. So this is almost like the Negroes who want to be white. You know, I mean, just to put that in plain kind of terms today, even though it's not so clear what does that mean, but it should be clear. You understand? In other words, we have become it's become so normalized, right? It seems such like a normal thing. It's like even sometimes when I look around, I see folks with these, like, you know, black people doing the blonde kind of stuff. You understand? And you see it so often, it's not shocking or anything, but that's what's shocking. You understand? That is what's shocking. I mean, on a certain level, it's like if you saw a white guy walking around for Afro, all right, I guess you can't say nothing about that if you were to do it, because then you'd be a hypocrite. But where did that come from? How was that breakdown also occurred to us in the very same way? In Jamaica, just to sum it up right here, we can see this in this Jamaican aspect, because we hear a lot of, from the elders, we heard a lot about, like, some actually came from, like, trench town, some came from ghetto, or some came from country and hard circumstances. But then you had a lot of those who were like the upper crust, so-called middle class ones, who kind of came into it, and not all of them coming under malicious reason, but you had something that watered down the movement when they got away from the true light, when they got away from the true teaching. So you have some Rastas, right, who basically says, I'm just into the marijuana and the reggae, and nothing spiritual, you understand, and nothing really so much about Ethiopia or Africa or repatriation, not even reparation. It's just more or less, I want to have my dreadlocks, smoke my weed, listen to reggae, and have a good time. On a certain level, that's the kind of breakdown, even in Rastafari. So you can see this on many different levels, this contrast, right? And the contrast is basically between light, right, and darkness. Others want to remain in their ignorance, because their standard, like with the Boule and the Hellenistic of the Maccabees' time, their standard, right, was the Pharinge, was the Goyim, was the Gentiles. They basically worshipped at the altar of the Gentiles. And those who were opposite to them, you understand, held to that holy covenant. You understand? In spite of the course, the tribulation, you understand, as it says, I is the sufferer. You understand? I, the black survivor. You understand? The wailer. You understand? Those who recognize that we must enter into the kingdom of God through tribulation. So it's not the tribulation we focus on. You understand? We focus on Zion, right? We focus on the kingdom, right? The King of Kings and his Christ. We focus on a world in which righteousness, right? And we recognize before we can get that, we have to deal with judgment. You understand? Self-judgment, and come to the foot of God. You understand? As well as preach and proclaim and bring in that judgment. You understand? Not necessarily through just the Maccabean way. You understand? I mean, this is something that we wanted to touch on, because by the time we have to come to the physical battle, that means that we've already failed the spiritual war, the spiritual and the psychological warfare. By the time it has to come to a physical battle. And if you're beginning the battle from the physical, you understand, without the true spirituality, the true light, then you already lost the battle, and you already lost the war. So Maccabees is very interesting in that link and that connection. But as far as an actual Maccabee Bible, I think what they were trying to tell us, right, is that struggle to maintain our divine heritage, and that struggle not to sell out, you know, in spite of the circumstances, in spite of the bribery, in spite of all the false things of the world. You understand? And the very same thing that happened even then, we can see it kind of happens almost in generation to generation. So we in our generation, we have a choice. the choice is very clear. To be children of God, right? Or to be children of the world, to be children of damnation, to be children of Cain, children of destruction. So the force is two ways. Choose which one you will follow. Shalom to my brothers and sisters, and to all others, repent.
Everything I'm looking at seems crazy. The newspaper, the television, nothing's right. Nothing's telling me what's true. It's like I fell into a bucket of cream and kicked my legs until I became a mouse. What's that about? I'm a conspiracy realist, not a conspiracy theorist. I want a t-shirt that represents me. What? There's one that's available? Go to shop.truthertees.com, says the voice in my head. Shop.truthertees.com. It's not crazy. I'm not afraid to go on the internet and go to shop.truthertees.com. I'm not scared. I taken out bowling balls that look like you. That's what I said. Straighten out. Get your conspiracy realist t-shirt. Don't make me come over there. You look good. You look good.
Hey, welcome back to Truther Talk. Thanks for listening and hanging in there.
I know. We're on our last segment. Now we did Christmas and Hanukkah, and we're going to talk a little bit about Kwanzaa. So to complete our little Merry Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa episode.
Yeah, whatever you guys are celebrating, if you celebrate something this time of year, or even if you're an atheist, I mean, you can celebrate the winter solstice. You know, we were talking about scientists. If you believe in science, you can celebrate your
science. I don't know.
Your experimental, your lab coat, your white coat, and your goggles, or whatever you do. Remember Professor Clink? It reminds me of Professor Clink from The Simpsons.
Yes, that's who I was thinking of. Yeah, when he was talking like that. Yeah. Yeah. So they're different. If there's I mean, Christmas, Hanukkah, and Kwanzaa were the only three that I knew that people celebrate. But if there's somebody that has another religious or social holiday that they celebrate around this time, please write us and let us know so we can get it together for next year. I'd be interested to know. Cover different types of people, and hope we didn't really miss anybody. But if we did, let us know. Write to us. So.
Well, there's only so much we can do in this.
Yeah.
But we had, it's. I mean, and I frankly didn't know, and I still feel like there's a lot of information missing on the origins of these holidays. I mean, we talked a little bit about the origins of Christmas, but some of it is still a mystery because we don't really know if it's sort of steeped in astronomical kind of things. We were talking a little bit with Liam, and he said that the worship of the sun god might have something more to do with agriculture. But I don't necessarily think that I agree with that because, like I had brought up to him, is that if you're a hunter or a gatherer, you would still have scarcity in the winter of food. So wouldn't the sun still be valuable to you, that you would worship it? I think there's no limit to how much people worship the sun, even to this day, because of its healing properties and all of that, and like the god, it is also as he pointed out. Well, if it's hot and you're in the desert, well, yeah, like your god, it can be kind to you, and it can be your healer, and it can also be your your destroyer. And if you've researched the whole global warming myth, then you know that warmings and coolings and all these things have happened throughout history, and it's really driven by the sun. It's not, whatever they're claiming, all this stuff that they claim is causing it. They're giving false reasons. I mean, there might be some, modifications of the weather, but they don't have the control of the weather. Yeah. I tell people there's a distinction between that, because the sun is what really controls it. Yeah. They can modify it by, spraying ribbons in the sky, things like that. They can make it hotter for a period, or they can do whatever they do for a period, and make it simulate an earthquake or something. But as far as the actual control of it, the sun would be something to worship.
Do you believe that? Have you looked into HAARP stuff?
A little bit, I mean, not much, because I just don't know what to do about it, and I don't really, it's one of those things. I try to focus on things that are that you can prove with the data and things that you can actually do something about. So with that, it's like I don't really know what to do about it, for one, and secondly,
it's kind of scary that people are. I know they're seeking that. They're seeking to modify weather. I know there's that interview I saw a while ago. I think his name is Nick Balak, or there's a book called Angels Don't Play This Harp, and he says that he worked for HARP, and that's what they're doing. He says they can do it, but I don't know, man. That's just something that kind of freaks me out.
Well, I say prove it. I mean, if he can show us, the data to prove it. I mean, are there secret documents and they have things? And I'm sure there are. Yes, of course there are. But there are so many things that are out in the open.
Yeah.
Why are they hiding this? It's like, but all the vaccination information is available. The HIV information is available. The history on the banking system and the Federal Reserve is available. The MK Ultra is out in the open and available. So why is this such a mystery? But I do believe that they're trying. I do believe. I know that they're chemtrailing this guy. There is evidence to show you that. So
where can I find evidence about chemtrails? I'm just kidding. You're like, look up.
Yeah, you can look up in the sky.
Outside and look up. But there are people that don't even believe that when they can just see that that's not normal. There are people that like, I need evidence. There are no studies.
It's looks exactly like what their lectures on geoengineering and NASA are. They show you pictures of it, and they talked about the very chemicals that we're finding in parts of the country in high quantities. So whatever. I mean, They can say they're not doing it and then give you the document to show you that they are. So whatever. I mean, but as far as them being able to control the weather, I like to say that there is a distinction, because I get weary of people who want to give these people the power of God.
Yeah.
The controlling elite.
I would say they're seeking the power of God. They are trying to play God on many levels, but they don't have. They never will.
No, they don't have the power of God, and and then they never will, and they're trying to simulate it, and that's what this whole transhumanism thing is about. That's what's trying to create life, and trying to do all that is trying to be able to control the, what God can do, and they can't. So they're a bunch of losers. But anyway, back to the holiday thing.
Kwanzaa, April? I'm just kidding.
I don't celebrate Kwanzaa, but I don't really know exactly what it is. Do you know what it is?
Let me tell you a little bit about Kwanzaa.
All right, let's go.
It's a social holiday. It was created in the 60s. I forgot the guy's name. We're going to play a little clip that gives a little bit more information. But it's basically a way of, it's on the 26th of December. It starts the 26th of December. It goes on for 7 days. And it was created as a social holiday to help with the identity of, I guess, the African Americans in this country, because a lot of African Americans are, as you know, when they were brought over as slaves, they were stripped of their identity. And this happens not just with African Americans, but any culture that's been enslaved, and kind of moved to another place, they usually lose their identity. So in the 60s, when they were having a lot of civil rights stuff going on, and they were bringing back, they were trying to educate African Americans about their history to give them a stronger foundation of self and who they are. And this guy created Kwanzaa, and it's basically a way of reevaluating yourself and your community. And basically, it seems like it's similar to Hanukkah in some aspects, and they have like a Kanara, which is kind of like a menorah that's a candle holder, but for Kwanzaa it's called a Kanara, and they have 7 candles that they put in the Kanara, and they light each one for the 7 days, and they have 3 black candles, 3 red candles, and 1 black candle, and 3 is for the green is for the land that was taken, red is for the blood that was shed, and black is for the people. So yeah. I mean, it's really new. It was so hard to find. Any information really in audio form on it that we could put on the show. I put like a little news clip that kind of gives basically a little rundown. I know there are a few details I probably missed about it. But if you want to research Kwanzaa, you can research some yourself. We always encourage people to do their own research and, not necessarily take our word for everything because we don't know everything, but we just try and share the knowledge that we come across. But yeah, I don't celebrate Kwanzaa, but yeah, anyway. That was short, but I just wanted to try, like we were just saying, we're getting a holiday show together, so we wanted to kind of just, at least acknowledge the three holidays that we know a lot of people celebrate. So, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that and whatever you're doing, and we're always about seeking the truth, as we say time and time again, so we want to get to kind of the history of what the origins of these holidays are. We're not saying don't celebrate them and don't spend time with your family, or don't, if you're offended by any of the things that you hear about what they really are, then, we're not trying to discourage you from spending time with your family, or like, the creation of the celebration of the Christmas tree, or any of these kinds of things, and how this was, it really has nothing to do with Jesus. But, that's fine, though. If you have fun lighting your tree and decorating with your family, then I don't see that that's anything terribly sinful about that. So, and if you recycle it and put it back, try and, because you can do that with your Christmas tree at the end. Most cities will pick it up for recycling at certain days, and they'll let you know what days those are. So, it's not nothing horribly sinful. And it's interesting that you're talking about Kwanzaa. I came across this guy, and you said that there's similarities to Hanukkah, and I came across this guy on YouTube, and I haven't finished watching this video, but he's called Rastafari Sabbatical, and he was saying that, he's a black Jew, and he was talking about Hanukkah, the war of the Maccabee and the Maccabee Bible, and he says that the origins of the Maccabees, who we talked about, were the Jews who revolted against the Greeks, who were trying to control their choice of religion. And that's the celebration of Hanukkah. And he says that African Americans should actually be celebrating Hanukkah because the Maccabees were of African descent. They were in like northern Africa and Syria, and then that's where this took place. And so it was kind of interesting. I didn't follow the whole thing, but I think that he was an interesting guy. So I would encourage people to check out his work. It's called Rastafari Sabbatical, and
put it in the write-up.
Yeah, I'll put it in the write-up, and people can go and do their own research on that and see what kind of background they can. Because we just don't have time to play all the videos that we've been looking at.
So we'll put links to them in the, if you guys want. If you find some other stuff too, great.
Yeah, let us know. And so we are really, really stoked, and I want to just kind of thank everybody for making this a really good year. Everybody, listeners and stuff we've had.
So much. Oh my God.
If we can look back on, some of the people that we've had on our show, I feel like it's just been an amazing experience so far.
Definitely. Can't wait until next year.
We started in, what was it, around in the spring of 2012. So we've been doing this for almost a year and a half now, and it's just been really incredible. I mean, we've had on these amazing authors and people, documentary filmmakers, and people like Gwen Olson, and who wrote Confessions of an RX Drug Pusher, and Fritz Springmeier, and all these people, just and some of our friends. Just every one of these interviews has just been really. I feel very blessed to have come into contact with a lot of these people, and having been very fortunate that we've our little radio show, and we've gotten so many great interviews, and we have people who are interested and are listening to our show. So
yes, thank you, listeners. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's
thanks for all the whistleblowers too. Like, I think about them a lot.
Yeah,
just in general, not just like people that we've interviewed, but people that just are willing to sacrifice their lives and their families' lives, that come out and they see, evil, I would say, for lack of a better word, evil basically going on. But, it takes a lot for them to stand out and speak up and stand up and say something. It's really hard. It's really touching. for the people that do that for the sake of humanity. You know, it's very, very beautiful, I think. Inspiring and yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible, and so we're really grateful to all of those who have, as you said, you know, sacrificed themselves for what they see as exposing an evil for the betterment of humanity. And so, yeah, I mean, we do our small little part, and I'm really, you know, but I love doing this show with you, and I love having all these guests on, and we just talked to our friend Liam. He's been such a big, important part of our show because he's been there to help us since the beginning, and we have his book available on our website if you want to buy it, truthortalk.com. So this will be our last show of 2013. And we'll probably be coming back with some new shows like mid to the end of January. So please stay with us. We'll be, running shows weekly, but we'll be starting some new interviews, and we have a huge list that we can't even manage it. It's just getting longer and longer by the minute. But we will, we've been lucky so far and gotten most of the people that we've wanted. So hopefully we'll continue to do that. And please stay with us and have a great holiday, whatever you celebrate. And Happy New Year. We will catch you. We'll see you next year.
All right. Peace, truth, and love you guys.
Truth and love, y'all. Bye-bye.
On a calendar full of centuries-old celebrations, Kwanzaa is the baby of the bunch.
Habari gani? Umoja.
In a world being rapidly homogenized, Kwanzaa was created in the hope that people of African descent might keep and celebrate their shared cultural heritage. If this Afrocentric holiday is still new to you, take heart. It's got a relatively short history to catch up on. The 1960s was a time of great socio-political upheaval in the United States, when millions of Americans were standing up to demand their civil rights. For many African Americans, the nation's slow march toward desegregation was encouraging. There was also renewed emphasis on black pride and a return to African roots. In 1966, Dr. Maulana Karenga, now a Black Studies professor at California State University, introduced Kwanzaa, a 7-day social holiday created to celebrate black identity, encourage unity, and preserve African culture. The name of the holiday is derived from the Swahili phrase Matunda ya Kwanzaa, which translates roughly as first fruits. At an inaugural ceremony for the new holiday, 7 children volunteered to carry the 6 letters in the word Kwanzaa. Rather than leave one child out, the holiday's spelling inherited a spare A at its end. Though Dr. Karenga intended Kwanzaa to be a social holiday rather than a religious one,
I like how you combine the two pieces.
He shrewdly specified that it was to be observed from December 26th through January 1st, the week between Christmas and New Year's. The timing was no accident. In the few decades since its inception, it has come to be celebrated by millions worldwide. Kwanzaa displays are rife with symbolism, with unity a strong theme of the holiday. One important tradition is the passing of the Unity Cup. Family members and guests sip from the cup and pour it in memory of their ancestors. The kinara, a candelabra that represents the original stalk from which all African ancestors originate, holds 7 candles, each representing one of the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. Umoja, or unity, is represented by the center black candle. On one side are 3 red candles, symbolizing self-determination, cooperative economics, and creativity. On the other side of the Umoja are 3 green candles, signifying collective work, purpose, and faith. Celebrations often include song, dance, and African drums. Though originally intended as a holiday of solidarity, In later years, Dr. Karenga took pains to emphasize that Kwanzaa's message and reach could be so much greater. Just as millions celebrate Irish culture on St. Paddy's Day and Mexican culture on Cinco de Mayo, Kwanzaa has grown to fulfill Dr. Karenga's vision. The vision that people of all stripes celebrate the African culture and spirit.
Hello, thanks for having me on your radio. Even though we're not from a famous rock and roll band, if we were, even though we sound a little like we are, we definitely wear a Conspiracy Realist t-shirt, because they're gear, aren't they? Oh yeah, they're really gear. I want to write a song about them. Conspiracy Realist t-shirts at truthatees.com. I gotta think of the middle eight. Shop.truthatees.com. What does that mean? It's the internet. What's that? I don't know. It's a net. It's between things. Shop.truthatees.com. What's that? It's where you get Conspiracy Realist t-shirts. Oh, gear.
My friend, Jordan Maxwell.
Here you go, kid. Don't be too bad. Okay. Thank you very much, Anthony. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? No. Okay. Well, we'll try it. My mother had an uncle when I was growing up as a child. I only remember him faintly because I was very little, who worked in the Vatican, Secretary of State's office. He was not clergy, he was civilian. And I grew up in my hometown having two uncles who were federal judges. My great-grandfather was a senator from the state of Florida, a very powerful man, and he died in office because they couldn't get rid of him. Why? Because he was mobbed, and everybody knew it. My Uncle Joe Valenzino used to come over every now and then with this big cigar and sit, and my father used to tell me, don't you ever, ever ask Uncle Joe what he does for a living. Ever. You just take whatever little presents and be cool and sit down, and if you open your mouth, I'll knock your teeth out. Okay? So I understood. There was a system in operation. My mother, my beloved mother, my father, my family, all of my family, including myself, were born and raised Catholic. So I'm not talking about the Catholic people. I'm not talking about the black people. I'm not talking about the Jewish people. I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about political organizations. We're talking about institutions that are financed all over the world. Huge, powerful financial empires. That's what I'm talking about, not the people. So I grew up understanding that there was a whole system in operation, and I decided at the ripe old age of 18, when I left home to come to California, I wanted to be on my own and do my own thinking. And I started out immediately collecting and reading books on Nazism, the communist movement, the philosophies, all the different occult sciences. And it became apparent to me that the entire world system is corrupt. So what we have today on the world scene, we call them world governments and United Nations with all the different governments represented. In point of fact, what we're seeing is gang wars. We got the Crips and the Bloods and the East Side Gang and the West Side and this group and that group. And today we call them nations. No, they're only gangs. They're all corrupt, money-grubbing, and so consequently, what goes around comes around. And we're seeing the complete breakdown of law and order around the world, and I believe that there is a divine retribution coming, and this is what I'm trying to do, is make people aware that do not put your faith and trust in man in whom there is no salvation. Do not look to your religious institutions for any spirituality. They don't have any. I don't care what it is, they don't have it. The very word church, the word church is an English word. From the King's English, it goes back to a word in Scottish, kirk, K-I-R-K, is church in English. Kirk in Scotland goes back to a Roman goddess, Circe. Circe goes back to a Greek goddess in Greece called Circe. Circe gave birth to Roman Circe. Roman Circe gave birth to Scottish Kirk, and Scottish Kirk gave birth to the English word church. So consequently, when you go to church, just remember it goes back to Mother Circe in Greece. Circe, if you go back to the library and get some books on Greek mythology, it will tell you that her name gives birth to what we call the church today. And Mother Circe was able to hypnotize people and bring them into her home, hypnotize them, and so that they would lose their mind and become animals, and then she would feed off of them, eat them and feed off of them. That's Greek mythology, Mother Circe. So consequently, Mother Church has done just that. She has hypnotized people, brought people into her house, and consequently lives off of them. One of the most important financial institutions in the world is the Roman Catholic Church, and all the other churches like the Mormons and Seventh-day Adventists and Christadelphians and Jehovah's Witnesses are trying to catch up with. Consequently, all you need to do is just go see Godfather 3, and it will tell you that's a true story, Godfather 3, about the killing of the Pope, when the propaganda duet, the P2 Lodge of Freemasonry, had to get rid of the Pope, because he was a good man. That particular Pope was a good man, and he wanted to try and straighten out the church, and they figured they better straighten him out. So he was dead. He died on the 33rd day of his pontificate. He died on the 33rd day. I think that's interesting. And that's in the movie Godfather 3. Now, if we understand that government is corrupt, and God knows now even the most ignorant among this nation are finally waking up to the fact that the whole thing is corrupt. If we understand that government is corrupt, banks are corrupt, our law enforcement are corrupt, there's virtually no institution, our educational systems, no institutions in this country are above taking money under the table and looking the other way, and it's become a way of life, and soon it will be for America a way of death. Now, once you understand that the entire system we're living under is corrupt and filled with lies and deception, and now the best thing you could do if you're a politician is just kind of keep things going, just kind of keep paying people off and hoping everything will come out all right tomorrow. And little by little by little, what goes around comes around, and we are facing a terrible time of judgment, I believe, by the divine forces in the universe, which men have called God. I don't know what God is, but I know what he isn't. One of my teachers once said, you can't make God do anything he doesn't want to, and if he's going to do something, you can't stop him. So consequently, since you can't influence it one way or the other, you should get in tune with the divine force of the universe and go with the flow. And that's what I believe, and that's what I've been trying to do all of my life. Just go with the flow and find out where the facts lead you. Because the more you begin to investigate what we think we understand, where we came from, what we think we're doing, the more you begin to see we've been lied to. We've been lied to by every institution. What makes you think for 1 minute that the religious institution is the only one that's never been touched? You can bet your bottom dollar that the religious institutions of this world are at the bottom of the dirt. The religious institutions in this world are put there by the same people who gave you your government, your corrupt education. The Knights Templars who set up your international banking cartels in the 12th, 13th, and 14th century are the same people that gave you educational institutions, colleges. Where do we get the word college? College comes from the collegia, the Latin Roman college of cardinals. I could go on for hours just giving you examples. When you graduate, you come out with a square mortar board, a black square mortar board. What's all that about? Black square mortarboards. It has to do with the planet Saturn. Saturn, you know, we're told that in the Old Testament that the Hebrew people, the Jewish people, were worshipers of one God. That's never been true, not true now, and never will be true. That's just one more story that's been given to us. That's never been true. The Hebrew people were worshipers of many gods, many different divine beings. They were the most eclectic theology on the face of the earth. Next to modern-day Christianity is Judaism. Eclectic meaning it has collected from all over the world concepts and ideas and put it together and called it today Judaism. Judaism today is the most eclectic religion on the face of the earth. Virtually nothing of what it teaches is true. Virtually nothing of its supposedly background is true. And consequently, the world is filled with violence, bloodshed, or disorder. Good people are dying. There are children who are starving. Our world is in trouble. And people are calling out to God for protection. People are calling out to God to help our nation, and never realizing for one moment that the divine presence in the universe not listening. Why? Because you have your own concepts of whatever you think is true, whatever you believe to be true, but you have never confronted the real truth. The real truth is that the people who are in power, who put this system together, have been in power for thousands of years. This has been going on from day one. I have the highest of respect for the Bible. Anyone who knows me knows I read it and study it all the time. But I'm also well aware that there are encoded messages. The rabbis will tell you that in the Old Testament is filled with encoded messages. And I believe that Christianity is probably the most powerful encoded message the world's ever had. It's one of the oldest messages in the world, and I believe that the Christian teachings in the original scriptural understanding is the most important, volatile story the world's ever known. And it's sitting right in front of you, and most people don't even see it. Let me go back to the original Hebrew religion. Because it forms the basis for Christianity, we need to look at where did any of these things come from. I'm famous for doing that. I couldn't care less who I offend. I want to know the truth. And all you got to do is go to any good library and just start reading. There are hundreds of great reference books out there that tell you where things have come from. First of all of the things which are going on in this world today, from 9/11, all of the wars in the Middle East, all of the incredible bloodshed that's being spilled all over the earth, can be traced back to, and you might want to remember what I'm saying here, because I'm sure you're not going to make the connection when I first tell you, but I'm going to try to explain it to you. The things which are happening today, the people who are in power in this country, the great generals from around the world who are planning wars and violence and bloodshed, all of this stuff can be traced back to the planet Saturn. Saturn is a very, very pivotal, important concept in theology and religion. And most people have never been told any of this and have no knowledge of it at all. But the planet Saturn is very important in world affairs, in theology. In the Islamic belief, the holy city of Mecca, which is in Saudi Arabia, Mecca has a Masonic circle, and within the Masonic circle is a square, because you got to do everything on the square, remember. You have a town square, you have New York Square, you have Vatican Square, you have Red Square, you have all kinds of squares. Why? Because this is Masonic. And it goes all the way back into the ancient world, the terms and symbols. Again, the planet is called the black square. It's called the dark sun, the black sun. This is what the Nazis and the SS and the Gestapo wore black. That's why priests wear black. That's why judges wear black robes. Why do you think a judge wears a black robe? He wears a black robe because when you used to graduate from university, you wear a black robe. Why black robes? Darth Vader wears a black robe. What the hell does a black robe have to do with anything? The judges wear black robes. You know, Supreme Court judges wear black robes. Black robes represent the priesthood of the planet Saturn, the Saturnalian Brotherhood. All you need to do is study Nazism, and you will begin to see that the powers behind the Nazi Party, the Thule Society, the Germanian Order, were all members of something called the Saturnalian Brotherhood, the Brotherhood of Saturn. Saturn was the god of darkness, chaos, and destruction. He teaches you a lesson. He will take your life if you don't listen to him. So consequently, Saturn was very, very important in the ancient world. Thank you. Saturn's name, incidentally, in the old Phoenician ancient Canaanite religion, in the Middle East, the old Phoenician Canaanite worship of the planet Saturn was the most important god of all the ancient world, was the planet Saturn, and his symbol, long before the Hebrews were ever in Canaan, the symbol in Canaan for the planet Saturn was a six-pointed star. Today we call that star the Star of David. There was no Star of David. It's the Star of Saturn. All of the Jewish reference books, all the Encyclopedia Judaica, you go to the synagogue, go up into Mulholland Drive, up to the Jewish University and spend 3 weeks there and look up Saturn. You'll find out that 98% of all Judaism is a worship of the planet Saturn. Better wake up and understand where this stuff comes from. Because if there is a God in heaven, if there is a divine presence in the universe that demands righteousness and justice, then you're going to have to rethink what we believe and where we're going and what the world is all about, because for the last 2,000 years we haven't done too well. Logic alone should tell you that when Jews were being marched into concentration camps, they were praying obviously to their God for protection and for help. There was no help coming. Christians have been praying to God to help this nation, to protect their family, and evil grows and multiplies each day. And the more Christians pray, the more evil the pervasiveness becomes. And the reason why is because we are not in tune with the universal God force. We're not in tune with the truth. We're in tune with what we've been told is the truth. We understand that thing that we've been told about government, that we have to pay your taxes because that's the law. You think, what law? Where is there a law that says that? Well, it's in there somewhere. No. Where is the law? Then you find out, well, it was just a lie. The whole thing was a lie. The whole thing is a sham. I have tons of videos, of slides I'd like to show, but there's so many things I want to talk about too. Let me get back to the planet Saturn. Saturn was referred to, as I said, its symbol was the six-pointed star. Today we call it the Star of David. Saturn was referred to as El, E-L. El was the god Saturn in the old Phoenician Canaanite system. And consequently, anyone that promoted the worship of El is where we get the word elder. You become an elder because you were worshiping El. And when you worship El and become an elder, then how did you get to be an elder? You got elected. So therefore we have elections. Now that you have been elected to be an elder, now you are one of the elites. Why? Because now you have moved up, like in an elevator. You are now moved up in society. Consequently, it's all money. It's all manipulation and exploitation coming out of Phoenicia, Canaan. It goes back to the old Sumerian, Babylonian systems of words and terms and symbols and emblems. that have been used to manipulate the whole human race. Because our masters don't give a damn about you or your family or your destiny with God. All they care about is what they have always cared about, and that's controlling the whole damn world. Somewhere along the line, we're going to discover we've been had, if we haven't already figured it out. I want to show you how the planet Saturn, the Saturnalian Brotherhood, the worship of the planet Saturn, Saturn's color was black. The black, each one of the gods and each one of the planets were associated with a different color. Green was associated with Venus, and that's why today in Islamic countries today you will see all of their flags and harlotry in Islamic world are in green. And you'll see the crescent with the star. Many people think the crescent is the crescent of the moon, but it is not. According to the actual research documents, the crescent on the Islamic flags is the crescent of the planet Venus. And the star represents Venus. It is a religion that is based on the worship of Venus, but which has incorporated the Saturnalian philosophy in it. So, like all the other religions, it is also a very eclectic religion. We hear that God's name is Yahweh. Let me tell you something about Yahweh. I mean, I've spent 42 years looking at this stuff, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm amazed at how many people don't even begin to know what these words mean. Yahweh is not the name of God. Yahweh in Hebrew is an expressive term. It's expressing something. It's describing something. It's not a formal name of God. Yahweh in Hebrew simply means, and the best way to explain what the word means is to take a garden hose and hold the end of it, turn on the water, and you feel the pressure building up. When you release the hose, it's a release of pressure. It's a release of energy. In the Hebrew, in the ancient Hebrew, the release of dynamic energy was called Yahweh. And it was always associated with sex. It's the building up of the sexual urge, and the releasing of sex in the sex act was referred to in the ancient Phoenician Canaanite system as being one with Yahweh, the explosion of divine creativity. That's why our Jewish physicists have told us the universe came into existence by a big bang. The ancient Phoenician Canaanites said that the women should listen to their god Saturn. They always knew Saturn had rings. So they said the women should listen to their gods. So women were to wear earrings. Men were to get married before their God, so they were to wear a wedding ring. Kings were to get crowned before their God, so consequently they would have a round crown, the corona. The ring, Saturn, is the god of this world. From that we get the dark side of the Force, Darth Vader. Remember Darth Vader with his Nazi helmet speaking through the Masonic triangle? Somebody better do their homework. This stuff is fascinating when you get into it. In the ancient Phoenician Canaanite system, when it finally bled into Europe thousands of years ago, it formed what we call the Celtic Druidic system. The Celtic Druidic system had its origins in the old Phoenician Canaanite system. That whole area we call today Israel and Lebanon, that was called Phoenicia, Cana. And consequently, that whole system of the Canaanite religion found its way into Eastern Europe and then into Northern Europe and formed the basis theologically for what came to be known as the Celtic Druidic system. The Celtic Druidic system, one of the most important symbols, and some of you have heard me say this before, one of the most important symbols in the old Celtic Druidic system was a magic wand, like Merlin the magician with his magic wand. That's Celtic Druidic. Magic wands were always made out of holly wood. Okay? And they're still working their magic on us in Hollywood. Consequently, we go back to Yahweh. I mean, have you ever wondered why we call God the Father? You ever thought about that? I mean, women, some of the women's liberals were saying could be a God the Mother, you know. I don't know. But the point being is that why do we call God the Father? It's because of rain. Rain is why we call God the Father. And consequently, the idea was that the earth was our mother, Mother Nature, Mother Earth. And Mother Nature gets impregnated with God's, the Father's, sacred fluid that comes and falls on the earth and impregnates Mother Nature because everything grows. And so once a year, there was a celebration in Phoenicia, Cana, when the spring rains would come. And consequently, the Phoenician Canaanites knew that the rains were coming and it was going to bring a whole new life to the earth. So consequently, they had a celebration of spring, and it was called the marriage feast of Cana. The marriage feast of Cana. And this is in the Bible. As I said, that there are many things in the scriptures that are hidden right in front of you. And if you don't know what they mean, you don't know where they came from, you'd be surprised when you begin to look at where these stories come from. The whole idea of the marriage feast of Cana was Mother Earth, Mother Nature asked God's Son, our risen Savior, and of course the Son is your risen Savior. As a matter of fact, if it don't come up, we're dead. So consequently, the Son was our risen Savior, and so Mother Earth asked God's Son to draw water. The water is drawn by the sun, so it can grow, it can fall on the grapes, and the grapes can be made into wine, so it changes water into wine. And this goes back to the old ancient Phoenician Canaanite, and even the Jewish rabbis will tell you that. Consequently, there are symbols and ideas and concepts in government which are put there purposely to mislead you. There are symbols and ideas in all of our systems purposely to mislead you. And I'm saying that even the theological basis for what we think we're doing has also been misled. And until such time as we get it right, we're never going to have that divine protection that the universe offers you when you're doing it right. And again, what I do is not to offend anyone, but I want to show you how these things have crept into our modern day society. Our international banking cartels, which control, finance, and organize and direct all of this corruption, wars, and bloodshed, and we're all well aware of that, but most people don't know that international banking cartels go back to the Vatican. The Vatican, as far back as the 5th, 6th, and 7th century, was the power of Europe. The Vatican dominated Europe, and Europe dominated the world. Even the Uniform Commercial Code, the international banking codes of the world, are based on Vatican canon law. I mean, that's why when you walk into a courtroom, why do you have to go to court? Anybody ever wonder why you go to court? I mean, you play basketball on a court, and you play tennis on a court. The whole idea on a court is to put the ball back in the other guy's court. That's right. It's just a game. Back and forth, they're throwing the ball back at each other, and the judge is there wearing a black robe. Black because of the planet Saturn. Saturn was the god of banking. That's why the judge sits on the bench. Look it up. Look up the word bench. You will find the word bench is a Latin word for a bank. So the judge rules for the bank. He don't care who's going to win or lose. Somebody's going to pay. And he's going to get paid. What does he care? Okay? So consequently, the judge rules for the bank. He sits on the bench. The whole idea is you're in court to play ball back on the court. How do you play tennis on a court? You play with a racket. Why? Because the whole thing is a racket. They're using terms and symbols and emblems. And they're playing on you. You know, a lot of people think, well, these are just play on words. Don't bet on it. We have something called the California criminal justice system. Criminal justice? Not American justice system. Not the people's justice system. It is the California criminal justice system. You think that's by chance? Think about it. You think that the government makes mistakes? The only mistake is that you're thinking that they're making mistakes. These guys know what they're doing. When they say criminal justice, they know what they're talking about. The criminals are in charge of the justice. That's why it's a criminal justice system. Okay? And if you go back into the most ancient times, and this is a subject I've always loved, is ancient theologies. If you go back into the most ancient times that we know of, the most, all nations of the world and all the ancient world agreed that the most evil presence on the face of the earth, the most evil thing in all the ancient world was darkness. When the sun went down, it gets cold, and the boogeyman comes out. And all of the predator animals come out. They're coming out because it's cold, and they're looking for something to eat. And humans are not designed to live like that. Humans have thinner skin and are designed by their creator not to live like animals. I mean, we couldn't live in a forest like a deer that is sub-zero and it doesn't seem to bother him. You'd be dead in about an hour. But the point being is that darkness was the most evil thing that man had to face. And consequently, all of the predator animals came out at night. And it got cold. And consequently, when the sun would come up in the morning, that was the one thing that saved the human race, is the coming of the sun, God's sun, the light of the world. Of course the sun lights the world. And the sun doesn't belong to China or Africa or anybody else. It belongs to God. So it was God's Son, our risen Savior. And of course the sun is your Savior, because if it don't come up, we're dead. But once you understand the concepts and ideas, then you begin to question, why did Judas go out and kiss Jesus? The scripture, you know how in the scripture talks about Judas went out and kissed Jesus? First of all, many Christians think Judas went out and kissed Jesus to identify him. Logic alone would tell you that's not true, if you just think about it. I mean, in a little Mickey Mouse town, and where Jesus would have been living, in a little small, it's not Chicago, it's a little small town, and even the Romans back in Rome knew who Jesus was, so everybody knows who he is, everybody knows what he's doing. And consequently, when the scribes and Pharisees, the religious leaders, decided they'd had enough of him and wanted to arrest him, you think they're going to have to send out somebody to find him and point him out? No, everybody in town knows who he is. Well, then why did Judas go out and kiss him? And most people think Judas went out and kissed Jesus to identify. It doesn't say that. It says he went out to kiss Jesus to betray him, not identify. What do you mean betray? That's interesting, because even the mafia today, when they're going to kill you, they give you the kiss of death. They've kissed you off. Why? Because in the old ancient world, when a scorpion bites you, the scorpions in the Middle East have two stingers, one on top of the other. And when they bite you, they leave a cut in your skin that looks just like a human lips, looks just like lips. And consequently, the ancient people said that you just got the kiss of death. He just kissed you off, okay? And consequently, that's what Judas was doing, giving him the kiss of death. Why? It has to do with astrotheology. Very interesting stuff. Now, I could talk all night on this stuff because I love it, but I wanted to show you a few, because I believe that seeing things are a lot more impressive than just hearing me talk. If you remember Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, first of all, when Indiana Jones is going out to look for the Lost Ark, we're talking about the Ark of the Covenant. Where's the first place he goes to? He goes to Tibet. Now, why would you go to Tibet if you're looking for the Hebrew Lost Ark of the Covenant? Well, it's because Tibet has something very, very important connected to that symbol of the Ark of the Covenant. You better go back and look at the Buddhists and the Tibetans to understand the Ark of the Covenant, period. Second, where does he go? Once he goes to Tibet, who does he find up in Tibet looking for the Lost Ark if it isn't a Nazi? And consequently, where did they go from there? He goes directly to the Holy Land to look for the lost Ark of the Covenant. No, he goes to Egypt. Why Egypt? It's because Steven Spielberg has many things, but stupid ain't one of them. He goes to Egypt because the whole idea of the lost Ark is Egyptian, not Hebrew. 1,000 years before Hebrews were ever in the area called Egypt, the Egyptians had something called the Ark of the Contract. The Ark of the Contract, which I will show you, the Ark of the Contract was a box with two angels' wings, with wings over it, and it was an Egyptian symbol, and it symbolized a contract that the pharaohs had made with the gods who came down here from Sirius, from the ancient star system of Sirius. They were called, and Sirius is called the dog star. And consequently, you take dog, D-O-G, and turn it around for us, it becomes God. G-O-D is dog spelled backwards. It goes back to Sirius, the dog star. It goes back to Anubis in the Egyptian. So that the Ark of the Contract became known as the Ark of the Covenant. No, it's the Ark of the Contract, and it was 1,000 years before Hebrews ever had it. Consequently, when you understand our symbolism in theology and religion, you come to find out that we have been sold a bill of goods on so much. And why do you have these institutions that the religion, philosophy, politics, all of these systems are institutions which are being financed, organized, and directed by the people who mean to put you into bonds and chains. God has created all of the animals to be free. He created everything. God who has created all things. Freedom is the one thing that you see everywhere, except for man. And consequently, the real freedom in man is up here. Consequently, the old Hiram Man, one of the first governors of the state of California, Hiram Man said, I think it was Hiram Man that said, when no man is safe, when freedom fails, the best men rot in filthy jails, while those who cried, appease, appease, are hung by those they tried to please. Meaning that there can never be a common cause with darkness. There's no place for light dealing with darkness. You have to know the truth and seek the truth, and the truth will set you free. That's an old adage, but it's true. The more you educate yourself, the more you understand where things come from, the more obvious things become, and you begin to see lies everywhere. Let me show you a few slides, because I got tons of them, and you don't have to put that in right now. No, I just got that just in case something were to happen. Smith's Bible Dictionary. In Smith's Bible Dictionary, look up the word ark. Thought I had a larger. Anyway, the word was adopted from the Egyptian. There's an Egyptian ark. It goes on to say that the ark was a ark of the contract in Egypt, which was copied later by the Hebrews and called the Ark of the Covenant. Here's a dictionary of the Bible, another one. And there again, you look up the word ark and it will tell you it was an Egyptian ark. The Egyptians had and came up with the idea of a sacred ark. There is the ark that was found in King Tutankhamun's tomb, when they found the tomb of King Tut. And there is King Tutankhamun's ark that was found in his tomb. Here it is again. You will see the Egyptians carrying the ark. Again, you will see at the top left, they're carrying the holy ark. This is the Egyptian, not Hebrew. This is 1,000 years before Hebrews were ever even near Egypt. They had the lost ark. Now, the next one is Solomon's temple. We're told about King Solomon's temple. That's the word Sol-Om-On. S-O-L is the sun in Latin. In Latin, the word sun is S-O-L, Sol. And in the Hindu priest of the sun, they call the sun Om. Remember the priest of Om? They chant Om. And On is the city of the sun. The Greeks call it Heliopolis. It's called Heliopolis to this day. But the Egyptians, Heliopolis. Heliopolis means the city of the sun. The city of the sun, Heliopolis in Greek, was originally called in the Egyptian On. Look it up in any dictionary, O-N. That's why when you walk into a room, you flip a switch on. Because On was the city of the sun in Egypt. So the three words for the sun in the three esoteric languages of the world is Sol, Om, and On.